Hi, I'm Chefy Keisler, and I'm here at Precision Rod and Custom Shop in Sevierville, Tennessee. Precision Rod, one of our top installers, is installing the first SS700 to Jim Karam's Stellar's 1965 Corvette. Follow us along as we install the SS700 to this original 4-speed Muncie car. Precision has already removed the original 4-speed Muncie in the bell housing and clutch. They have resurfaced the flywheel, and they have decked and milled the bell housing for flatness. This is important because it establishes a good true plane between the face of the bell housing and the face of the engine. They have also performed the bell housing inspection and correction, we call the run out or dial in of the bell housing. They've got it within specs. They wound up having to use 7 valve offset dowel pins, but this is dependent upon the particular engine and bell housing combination used. There's no fixed formula for it. We have 7,000s, 14,000s, and 21,000s offset dowel pins to allow for any potential misalignment of the crankshaft to the bell housing bore. Precision Rod and Custom has already removed the manifolds on left and right side. They've unbolted the alternator and laid it aside. If the car had AC, they would unbolt it and lay it aside. They've removed the engine mounts on both left and right side, the 3 bolts on each side, and they've removed the fuel pump. Once those things are done, you can slide the engine forward. And on a 4-post lift, there's usually a jack bridge that slides back and forth. This jack bridge, we've set a motorcycle jack on it, but you could use any good flat jack or small jack that has a nice long surface. And they've supported the motor, and then using a small ratcheting strap, they've attached around the motor up to the front K-member support on the motor and just ratcheted the strap in, just pulling the motor back. The intention here is to be able to get the transmission up into place, move it forward, and marry it to the engine. And then after it's all married, bolted up, then slide the entire assembly back into place. Okay, so we'll let Precision Rod and Custom do their magic and make this thing come together. Next, Shane's going to remove the shifter tower, removing the dust cover first, 2 Phillips screws, and then removing the 2 socket cap screws that hold the clamp on the shift linkage, and then the 2 top bolts, which have been removed, and just pull the shifter tower straight up. We tilt the tail housing end up so that we can stick it up into the tunnel, get it up over the welded-in cross member. Welded-in cross member is kind of an impediment to progress, and they did away with the welded-in cross member in 1980. But for cars that were 4-speed equipped, the cross member is going to be welded in place. So have to work around it by getting the transmission tail housing angled up and then backing it up into the hole. Okay, so what Shane found is that removing the bell housing off the transmission, allowing it to be loose, gives you flexibility to spin it around, get it up onto the clutch. That's what we're trying to clear. And now he's cleared it. He's got it up in there. So now he's just basically finding the right position for the bell to hang while he raises the transmission up into the tunnel. If you're doing this at home in your garage without a 4-post lift, get some 4-ton jack stands, get 4 of them, raise the car up as high as you can, get a low-profile jack, floor jack, and get a transmission jack adapter. You can get it from Northern Tools or Harbor Freight, and you just slide that onto the spud of the floor jack, and this will allow you to have the adjustment front to back and left to right like Shane is using. It also will have the safety strap that goes around the transmission and is winched down. That's important to keep the transmission from flopping off the jack. You wouldn't be able to do it if you can't keep the transmission secured to the jack. Now, these tools that we're talking about are quite inexpensive. I think less than $100 you can buy this transmission jack adapter from Northern Tool or Harbor Freight. Now, Shane is lowering the motor a little bit to bring it down to the height of the transmission. Things are starting to level up and get the right angle. Now he's setting the release bearing in place to make sure it's right, and then get the fork clipped in correctly to the release bearing. It's very important that the release bearing be clipped onto the fork properly, because there's two ways you can do it, the right way and the wrong way, and there's not a lot of difference between the two. But once you go to operate the car, it makes all the difference between the clutch working or not working. Go to Keisler's video channel on YouTube to see this detail about the release bearing attachment onto the fork. Okay, Shane has removed his straps to pull the motor forward. Now he's hooking them up to the transmission cross member, and he's starting to ratchet it to pull the motor back to its original position. Closing the gap here of the bell housing to the motor. To make this happen, it's important to get the pilot of the transmission tip up inside the clutch hole and then on into the disc. Now at this step, sometimes it's needed to rotate the input shaft of the transmission so that you get spline match up. And usually we'll leave them in neutral, but sometimes we have to pop them into gear, so you just grab a hold of the shifter offset lever linkage and just push it forward or back to pop it into a gear. Looks like Shane got it up to the motor block. Shane's got the motor pulled back. You'll notice that the cross member bolt hole on the fixed cross member lines up to the transmission isolator bracket. And that's where you get the lineup.
With Jim Karam's install, we run into a couple of challenges as far as the exhaust. He's got like a cool stainless steel exhaust that comes down that has some electric cutouts to run side pipes or under car exhaust. It come into interference with the flange on the SS, and we just had to modify it and cut it a little bit off the flange. It didn't hurt the integrity of the transmission. And then we also had to take his stainless exhaust and cut some slits in it and gain a little bit of clearance on the side of the transmission. And then we went back and TIG welded it all up. It created a nice, air gap. Then we come back and wrap the exhaust with some exhaust wrap, and that, helps as far as heat transfer into the transmission. We also couldn't use the factory boomerang exhaust bracket on Jim's car. We had to fabricate with Keisler a rear mount exhaust hanger used on their C3 Corvettes. We incorporated it on the mid-year car, and it's something that's going to be offered in the kit as well.
Okay, Shane's moving on to the e-brake cable. He just finished tightening up the rear U-joint straps on the drive shaft. Drive shaft install is complete. These are the speedometer port block-off plugs. The smaller diameter one is for the mechanical speedo, and the bigger is for the electronic side speedometer port. Here we have the shifter tower finished, the lower dust boot installed. We have the speedometer cable installed. That is the nice sweep bend angle. The car doesn't take the backup light switch or the neutral safety, but if it was an automatic conversion and also if it was a backup light car from the factory, would use those. Using 3 quarts 3 ounces to 3 quarts 6 ounces. Dexron 6, also Mobile 1, ATF synthetic, and Dexron 3 are acceptable.
When we got the install finished, everything looked natural up inside the tunnel. Everything fit great. Even looking at the car from the side, nothing hangs down below the frame, and nothing looks unnatural about it. And as far as looking at the inside of the car, it's as expected with Keisler. Everything looks just like it's supposed to be like that. You wouldn't know it from an original car that was sitting beside of it.
When working with the transmission and installing it fits just as good as factory transmissions does. It really surprised me how nice and up in the car and up in the tunnel and how it fits and everything. It really surprised me. It was needing something like that, so we wouldn't have to cut cars up and stuff and keep your full bores and stuff in good shape, and you don't have to worry about it.
I looked under the car when they put their wrenches down and the car was considered finished. And I looked at the car and I said to myself, that transmission looks like it should have been there in the first place. Everything was clean. It was tucked up. There's nothing hanging down. It, at a glance, didn't look any bigger than the Muncie, but we know it slightly is because there's another gear in there. But I was frankly kind of impressed how clean the setup is as an installed unit.